Batman vs. Superman, the debate that will never go away. Batman and Superman have a long history together, and they have encountered each other in combat numerous times. But despite decades of established lore contrary to the fact, the great majority of people still believe that Superman can beat Batman. But in fact, Superman rarely wins against Batman, and for one main reason: morality. But before we dive into the complex nature of that psychology, let's examine the top 7 reasons why the Dark Knight was superior to the Big Blue Boy Scout. Superman and Batman have been crossing paths since 1952. In their first appearance together in Superman number 76. Though they shared a cover together about 10 years prior, this was the first story that had them competing. Since then, tensions between the two characters has always existed, but often for different reasons. No encounter has had bigger ramifications on the history of these two characters than Frank Miller's graphic novel, The Dark Knight Returns. This graphic novel has impacted much of the Batman mythology, including several of the movies, namely Tim Burton's 1989 film Batman and Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises. It was even hinted at San Diego Comic-Con in 2013 by director Zack Snyder and actor Harry Lennix that this story would influence the upcoming Batman-Superman movie. Taking place in the not-too-distant future, and toward the end of Batman's career, The Dark Knight Returns finds Superman as little more than a yes-man for the government, and Batman old and out of practice. When differing politics bring them together at the end, Batman and Superman give each other a pounding. The fight proved that there's very little Batman can do against Superman's strength, but when Batman employs everything he's got all at once, there's little Superman can do against Batman's cunning. The story brought into focus one of Batman's greatest strengths, and it's point number 1. Though a loner by nature, Batman often relies on his allies to get the job done, and he uses them with a perfect understanding of their strengths, wielding them like pieces on a chessboard. Robin, Nightwing, Catwoman, Huntress, Commissioner Gordon, the police. While Batman wouldn't necessarily rely on them to defeat Superman for him, he would use them to dissect the threat of Superman by distracting him or setting him up for a trap. In The Dark Knight Returns, it was the Green Arrow who Batman recruited to help slow Superman down through the use of a kryptonite arrow. Batman and Superman were fighting because Batman had finally killed the Joker. Consequently, the government decided that Batman needed to be brought into custody, and Superman was sent to do the job. Which brings us to... After giving Superman the pounding of his life at the end of The Dark Knight Returns, Batman fakes a heart attack. At the funeral, Superman realizes the death wasn't real. Batman had formulated the plan when the Green Arrow noted that the government needed Batman dead. Batman figured if it was his death they wanted, why not give them just that? Superman decides to go along with the plan, which allows Batman to continue his war against crime, training the next generation of crime fighters in complete secrecy, or until the next time he needs to pound some sense into Superman. In a story called Tower of Babel, Batman develops contingency plans to defeat all members of the Justice League in case any of them ever went rogue: Wonder Woman, Martian Manhunter, the Flash, and yes, even Superman. These contingency plans fell into the hands of an enemy and resulted in Batman having to save every member of the JLA from the very contraptions that he had invented, which brings us to point number 3. Is Superman afraid of Batman? Most likely. Almost everyone is. Here's why. At the Justice League Watchtower, most of the heroes are talkative, colorful, and relatively friendly, but Batman has a constant persona to withhold. He keeps in the shadows, and everyone keeps their distance from him because they know that Batman has them under constant surveillance. Superman knows that Batman is watching him, and Superman is generally aware of his own immense strength and the consequences if that were to ever fall into the wrong hands, and so, yes, he fears whatever countermeasures Batman has in store. The Tower of Babel story ends with Batman being forced out of the JLA because they're just too afraid of him. And the story exemplifies one of the major differences between the two characters. Superman is far too trusting, whereas Batman doesn't trust anyone. Batman's alter ego is worth billions of dollars. Superman's alter ego is worth $3.88, and that's before taxes. Bruce Wayne is leagues more powerful than mild-mannered journalist Clark Kent. If Batman wanted to fight Superman indirectly, he could use the power of Bruce Wayne to run a smear campaign and turn Superman's adoring public against him. He could turn him into a fugitive or a criminal, pit governments against him, or wipe out his bank account. Now, admittedly, this isn't typically Batman's style, but he could theoretically defeat Superman without it ever even having to come to blows. Technology is as much a part of Batman as heat vision is to Superman, so you better believe that in a fight with Big Red, Bats is bringing the big guns. What resistance could Superman offer against technology specifically designed to dampen his abilities? None. As a fighter, Superman has never proven very adaptable. He relies too heavily on his superhuman abilities and thus has never learned about improvisation. Thus, he's in no real position to react to anything that Batman can throw at him, which, for billionaire Bruce Wayne, would be a whole heck of a lot. Kryptonite, one of the stupidest plot devices ever conceived. Still, there's no way to deny it as a weapon for Batman to use against Superman. The substance weakens Superman and makes him violently ill, at which point Batman would just defeat him with his martial arts and combat skills. And that would really be all there is to it. Superman and Batman came to blows in the 5th part of a 12-issue story arc called Hush. When Superman fell under the control of Poison Ivy, it was up to Batman to unleash hell on the Man of Steel to stop what was essentially a living, breathing freight train of destruction. Thanks to an arsenal of weapons aimed at every one of Superman's senses and a kryptonite ring, Batman took him to task. But what really turned the fight in Batman's favor Batman instructed Catwoman to kidnap Lois Lane and throw her off the roof of the Daily Planet, believing that Superman's love for Lois and his inner desire to always do the right thing would force him to break out of Poison Ivy's spell. The ploy worked, though Superman was none too happy with Batman's tactics. Hush proved a very important point, that deep down, Superman is essentially a good person, and deep down, Batman is not. It's this difference in morality that enables Batman to do what's necessary to defeat his opponent, whereas Superman will always hold himself back. Sure, Superman can punch Batman to the moon, but he won't. Batman knows this, and he's not afraid to use Superman's own goodness against him. I'm generalizing quite a bit here, but in closing, when it comes to the debate of Batman versus Superman, people can never get around the fact that Superman is a physically superior opponent. But having greater strength is never a guarantee of success. Did Goliath defeat David? Did Xerxes conquer Greece? Was the Death Star able to withstand one X-Wing fighter? In the debate of Batman versus Superman, people too often underestimate the value of tactics and intellect. And moreover, if they were to really examine the psychology behind the differing moralities of Batman and Superman, they would arrive at one inescapable conclusion. Batman always wins.